Welcome to my channel of Gill Master Stories. Don't forget to subscribe button and press on the bell icon for more inspiration and mind-blowing stories. No one at Malibu Beach expected a quiet morning jog to become the stage for a life-or-death battle, but when Keanu Reeves spotted a grotesque barnacle-covered figure dragging itself out of the surf, he didn't hesitate. What others dismissed as lost cause, a creature too far gone to save, ignited something unshakable in him. Little did anyone know this moment would spark a journey of survival, second chances, and a bond that would leave the world in awe. The salty breeze of Malibu Beach carried a faint, haunting sound so soft that Keanu Reeves almost dismissed it as a trick of the waves, but there it was again, a hollow, desperate whimper that froze him mid-stride. His morning jog was supposed to clear his mind, a rare moment of solitude amidst the chaos of fame, but the sound rooted him to the sand. Squinting through the fog, he saw something moving near the water's edge. First it looked like a lump of driftwood or tangled seaweed, but as the tide receded, the shape became clearer. It moved barely. Keanu's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't debris, it was alive. Adrenaline surged as he sprinted toward the figure, his feet sinking into the wet sand. What he found stole the breath from his lungs. It was a dog, or what was left of one, a Doberman, skeletal and trembling, its once majestic frame distorted by grotesque barnacles that clung to its body like armor. Its black fur was matted with salt and blood, and its eyes, sunken yet pleading, locked onto his. With a silent cry for help, Keanu dropped to his knees, ignoring the cold spray of the waves crashing around him. "Hey buddy," he said softly, his voice cracking as he reached out a hand. The dog flinched but didn't pull away. Instead it let out a weak, almost inaudible whimper and tried to lift its head, only to collapse back onto the sand. Around him a few early beachgoers began to gather. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Others whispered in hushed tones, "That thing beyond saving." A man muttered, shaking his head, "It's better to let it go." Keanu shot him a look that could have frozen the ocean. "Not today," he said firmly, his hand gently brushing against the dog's barnacle and crusted side. The sharp edges cut into his skin, drawing blood, but he didn't flinch. "You're going to be okay," he whispered to the dog. "I promise." The weight of the moment hit him like a tidal wave. The creature before him was more than just a dog. It was a survivor, clinging to life against impossible odds. Keanu's mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do. Calling for help was an obvious first step, but every second felt like an eternity, and Apollo, as he instinctively named the dog in his mind, didn't have time to spare. The crowd thickened, their murmurs growing louder. "What's he even going to do with that thing?" a woman asked, her tone dripping with pity. Keanu ignored her. He slipped off his jacket and carefully draped it over Apollo's fragile body, shielding him from the cold. "Hang in there, buddy," he said, his voice trembling. "You've come this far. We're not giving up now." A young girl tugged at her father's sleeve, pointing at Keanu. "Daddy, he's the man from the movies," she exclaimed. The father nodded, his face a mixture of recognition and surprise, but Keanu didn't care about the attention. The only thing that mattered now was the life lying in the sand. Apollo shifted slightly under the jacket, his labored breaths rattling like broken glass. Keanu felt a lump rise in his throat. How long had this dog been suffering? How far had he come, dragging his battered body through the relentless ocean? The questions haunted him, but one thing was clear: this wasn't the end of Apollo's story. A lifeguard arrived, his whistle bouncing against his chest as he surveyed the scene. "Sir, that dog's in bad shape," he said. "We need to call animal control." "No," Keane said sharply, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We need a vet now." The lifeguard hesitated but nodded, pulling out his radio to make the call. Keanu stayed crouched by Apollo's side, stroking the only patch of fur not covered by barnacles. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No one's going to leave you behind." As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, Keanu felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He thought about his own life, about loss, resilience, and the second chances he'd been given. He thought about how Apollo's eyes, even in their pain, reflected a determination to survive. When the vet team finally arrived, Keanu helped lift Apollo onto a makeshift stretcher, cradling the fragile dog as if his own life depended on it. The barnacle scraped his arms, drawing more blood, but he didn't care. "Easy, buddy," he murmured as the dog let out a soft "When we going to fix this?" as the van's doors closed and the engine roared to life. Keanu sat beside Apollo, refusing to leave him for even a second. He didn't know what lay ahead, whether Apollo could survive the ordeal or if the damage was too great. But as he looked into those tired, trusting eyes, he made a silent vow. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would fight for Apollo, because every life deserved a second chance. As the rescue van sped down the coastal road, the salty scent of the ocean faded into the sterile clinical air of the veterinary clinic. Keanu sat in silence, his gaze fixed on Apollo, who lay motionless on the stretcher, his shallow breaths the only sign of life. The dog's body was a grotesque tapestry of barnacles and raw, inflamed skin, but beneath the layers of suffering, Keanu saw something else: resilience, a will to survive that mirrored his own in ways he couldn't yet explain. The clinic staff sprang into action the moment they arrived, their hurried footsteps and clipped voices breaking the tense quiet. "We've never seen anything like this." One of the vets murmured, her gloved hands gently inspecting Apollo's encrusted body. The barnacles weren't just attached, they had burrowed into his skin, creating a living prison that had robbed him of his freedom, his dignity, and nearly his life. Keanu hovered nearby, his fists clenched in a mix of helplessness and determination. He wasn't a veterinarian, a scientist, or a specialist in any way, but he knew one thing: Apollo had made it this far, and he wasn't about to let him down now. "Whatever it takes," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "He deserves a chance. Before I take you deeper into the story, I want to connect with you, my incredible viewers. Have you ever seen a bond between a person and an animal that defies explanation? If the story is already tugging at your heartstrings, hit that like button. It's a small action, but it helps us share these stories with more people who care as deeply as you do. And while you're here, let me know where you're watching from by dropping your country's flag in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. To the initial assessment was grim. X-rays revealed that some barnacles had embedded themselves so deeply into Apollo's muscle tissue that removing them could cause catastrophic damage. His blood work showed signs of severe infection, dehydration, and malnutrition. The vet team exchanged worried glances, their silence speaking volumes, but Keanu refused to back down. "We not giving up," he insisted, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had faced his own share of possible odds. Days blurred into nights as the team worked tirelessly to stabilize Apollo. Keanu became a constant presence, refusing to leave the clinic. Even when the staff urged him to rest, he spent hours at Apollo's side, speaking softly to the dog, his words a lifeline in the storm of pain and uncertainty. "You're stronger than this," he whispered one night, his hand resting gently on Apollo's head. "We're going to get through this together." Despite the dire circumstances, there were small victories. The vets managed to remove some of the smaller barnacles without causing further harm, revealing patches of raw but healing skin underneath. Each step forward, no matter how small, felt monumental, and slowly Apollo began to respond. He would lift his head weakly when Keanu entered the room, his tired eyes flickering with a glimmer of recognition. But progress came with setbacks. One night, Apollo's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. His breathing grew shallow, his body racked with tremors. The lead veterinarian pulled Keanu aside, her expression heavy with concern. "If we can't stop the infection soon, we could lose him," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hit Keanu like a punch to the gut, but he refused to let despair take hold. "He's not giving up," he said firmly, "and neither are we." As the team scrambled to adjust Apollo's treatment, Keanu took to social media, sharing Apollo's story in a heartfelt post that quickly went viral. "This dog has Endured unimaginable suffering, but he's still fighting. Let's show him he's not alone, he wrote, his words resonating with millions. Within hours, donations poured in to support Apollo's care, along with messages of encouragement from around the globe. With the world watching, the team pushed forward. The breakthrough came in the form of a cutting-edge serum developed by a marine biologist who had seen Keanu's post and offered his expertise. The serum, designed to mimic natural signals that cause barnacles to detach from surfaces, was untested on animals, but it was their best shot. Keanu didn't hesitate. If it gives him a chance, we're doing it, he said, his unwavering belief fueling the team's efforts. As the serum was administered, the room fell silent, every eye fixed on Apollo. Hours passed with no visible change, but then, slowly, the barnacles began to loosen their deadly grip, giving way. The first cluster fell away, revealing a patch of bruised but unburdened skin. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the room, and for the first time in days, you allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. "You're doing it, buddy," he whispered. "You're really doing it." The moment marked the beginning of Apollo's transformation. Day by day, the barnacles came off, and with each one, Apollo's spirit seemed to grow stronger. His once lifeless eyes began to shine, his tail twitched ever so slightly, and the softest wag appeared like a beacon of hope. Keanu couldn't contain his motion, his voice thick as he said, "You're a fighter, Apollo, and we're going to see this through. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over." What happened next was nothing short of miraculous, and it's a testament to the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. The progress was undeniable, yet Apollo's recovery remained a delicate balance between triumph and fragility. Each day brought new milestones, but with them came reminders of how close had been to the edge. The barnacle scars on his body told a story of survival, but the light returning to his eyes told a story of hope. Keanu had become more than just a caretaker, he was Apollo's anchor. One particularly quiet morning, as Apollo lay curled up on his padded bed in the clinic, Keanu sat cross-legged beside him, softly strumming an acoustic guitar he had brought to pass the time. The gentle notes filled the room, and for the first time, Apollo's ears twitched toward the sound. Keanu smiled. "You like that, huh?" he said, playing a little melody. Apollo's head lifted slightly, and though he couldn't yet wag his tail freely, there was something in his gaze that spoke volumes. Moments like this gave meaning to the sleepless nights, the hours of waiting, and the countless hurdles they had faced together. Apollo was no longer just a dog fighting for his life. He was a reminder of resilience, the embodiment of a second chance. But not every moment was serene. As Apollo began to regain strength, his instincts kicked in one afternoon while the vet team prepared for a hydrotherapy session. Apollo, startled at the sound of a dropping metal tray, the loud clang sent him into a trembling panic, his body pressing against the nearest corner. Keanu was at his side in seconds, kneeling to reassure him. "It's okay, Apollo," he said, his voice steady and calming. "No one's going to hurt you." Keanu knew Apollo's fear wasn't just physical, it was the weight of months of trauma carried silently but ever present. He worked patiently with the Doberman, gently guiding him through moments of anxiety with soft words and a steady hand. Over time, Apollo began to trust again, though the journey was far from over. One breakthrough came during Apollo's first swim in the hydrotherapy pool. The water, once his enemy, was now his ally. As he hesitated at the pool's edge, Keanu stepped in with him, his jeans soaked as he waded waist deep. "You're not doing this alone," he said gently, encouraging Apollo into the water. The dog paddled hesitantly at first, his movements uncoordinated and unsure, but with each lap his strokes became stronger, his confidence growing with every push against the water. By the end of the session, Apollo rested his head on Keanu's shoulder, utterly spent but visibly content. The staff watching from the sidelines wiped away tears moved by the quiet bond between man and dog. Keanu, soaked but smiling, murmured, "I told you, buddy, you're unstoppable." Days turned in 2 weeks, and Apollo's transformation became undeniable. His once fragile frame filled out, his coat grew glossy, and his scars began to fade both inside and out. He was no longer just surviving, he was thriving. Keanu began taking Apollo for short walks outside the clinic, the Doberman's gait still cautious but growing steadier with each step on one such walk. Apollo paused suddenly, his nose twitching at the scent of the ocean breeze. Keanu followed his gaze to the distant shoreline. "You remember, don't you?" he said softly. It was the place where their journey had begun, a place of pain and near defeat that had somehow become the foundation for their shared triumph. For the first time since his rescue, Keanu allowed himself to imagine a future for Apollo, a life not defined by survival, but by joy, freedom, and the love he so deeply deserved. He envisioned Apollo running on that beach, the wind in his face, his scar forgotten as he embraced the life he had fought so hard to reclaim. But there was still work to be done. The final stage of Apollo's recovery would test not only his physical strength but the bond that had formed between him and Keanu, a bond that had become as unbreakable as the spirit they shared. Apollo had grown stronger, his body no longer weighed down by the barnacles that once imprisoned him. His sleek black coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his gait was confident as he walked alongside Keanu to the outside world. Apollo looked like a picture of resilience, but Keanu knew there was still work to be done deep inside. Apollo remained cautious, always alert, as though he was waiting for something to go wrong. Keanu decided it was time to push Apollo out of his comfort zone, not just for Apollo's healing, but for his own. They ventured further from home, exploring new trails, bustling city streets, and even dog park. First, Apollo was hesitant, his body stiff and his ears flicking at every new sound. But Keanu stayed by his side, offering quiet encouragement and steady reassurance. One evening, while walking in a quiet neighborhood, the bond between them was tested in a way neither of them could have anticipated. As they rounded a corner, commotion erupted ahead. A delivery truck had veered off the road, its engine sputtering as it skidded to a stop near a small convenience store. The driver stumbled out, shouting frantically about something or someone inside. Keanu's instincts kicked in. He handed Apollo's leash to a bystander and approached cautiously, peering through the shattered windows of the truck. Inside, a young boy sat crying, his foot pinned under the twisted metal of the front seat. The flames licking at the engine bay sent a surge of adrenaline through Keanu's veins. "I need help over here," Keanu shouted, waving for assistance. But before anyone could react, the fire spread, the heat forcing everyone to step back. Everyone except Apollo. The Doberman barked sharply, pulling against the leash until the bystander let go without hesitation. Apollo bolted toward the truck, his powerful frame weaving through the chaos. "Apollo, no!" Keanu shouted, but the dog didn't falter. He leapt onto the truck's side, his paws scraping against the metal as he tried to reach the boy. Keanu rushed forward, his heart pounding together. Man and dog worked in unison. Keanu climbed into the cab, ignoring the searing heat, while Apollo stayed below, barking and nudging the boy's leg to keep him calm. "Hold on, kid," Keanu said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We getting you out of here." With a final push, Keanu freed the boy's leg and carried him out of the wreckage. Apollo followed close behind, his eyes scanning the scene as though ensuring everyone was safe. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Keanu's attention was solely on Apollo. The dog's paws were singed, his coat flecked with ash, yet he stood tall, his loyalty shining through every fiber of his being. Keanu knelt beside him, placing a hand on his head. "You're unbelievable, you know that," he said, his voice breaking. Apollo simply leaned into him, his body radiating a quiet strength that needed no words. That night, as they sat together in the glow of the firelight at home, Keanu thought about the day. Events, Apollo's courage had saved a life, but it was more than that. It was a reminder of the unbreakable bond they shared, a bond forged in struggle, trust, and love. Their story was far from over. If anything, it had only just begun. Together they were rewriting what it meant to heal, to trust, and to face the world as a team. Keanu looked down at Apollo, his hand resting On the dog's scarred yet strong body, "We've still got a long way to go, buddy," he said softly, "but I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else." Apollo had blossomed into a picture of strength and confidence. His once fragile body had fully recovered, his sleek coat shimmering under the sunlight. Keanu often marveled at how far they had come together, their shared journey a testament to resilience and the unbreakable bond between them. But life, as it often did, was about to test them in a way neither could have foreseen. One late evening after a long day, Keanu decided to take Apollo on a walk through the quiet streets near his home. The city lights cast a warm glow, and the soft hum of distant traffic created a comforting backdrop. Apollo trotted beside him, his gait confident and steady, his nose twitching at the faint scents carried by the breeze as they turned down an unfamiliar alley to shorten their route. A sharp noise shattered the peace, a metallic clatter followed by muffled voices. Apollo's ears perked up, and he let out a low growl, his body tensing protectively. Keanu instinctively stopped, his hand tightening on the leash as he scanned the dimly lit passageway. From the shadows emerged two men, their faces partially obscured by hoods. Their posture was tense, their intentions unclear. Keanu's calm demeanor masked the surge of adrenaline coursing through him. "We're just passing through," he said, evenly, his voice calm but firm enough. The men stepped closer, a smirk playing on his lips. "Nice dog," he said, his eyes lingering on Apollo. "Bet he'd fetch a good price." Keanu's jaw tightened, his stance shifting slightly as he prepared for the worst. "We're not looking for trouble," he said, keeping his voice steady, but trouble had already found them. The second man lunged toward Keanu, but before he could get close, Apollo sprang into action. With a ferocious bark, he placed himself between Keanu and the assailant, his powerful frame low and poised, his teeth bared in a warning that needed no translation. The man froze, his confidence faltering under the Doberman's intense gaze. The first man, undeterred, attempted to grab Apollo's leash. In a blur of motion, Apollo twisted free, his movements precise and calculated. Keanu took the opportunity to step back, his voice ringing out firmly. "Apollo, stay with me." Apollo obeyed, his body a shield between Keanu and the would-be attackers. The men hesitated, clearly underestimating the fierce loyalty and training of the dog before them. "You really don't want to do this," Keanu warned, his tone colder now, his protective instincts in full force. Realizing they were outmatched, the men muttered curses under their breath before retreating into the shadows. Keanu exhaled a breath. He didn't realize he'd been holding his heart pounding in his chest. He crouched down to Apollo's level, his hand trembling slightly as he stroked the dog's head. "You're incredible, you know that," he said, his voice tinged with both relief and gratitude. Apollo leaned into him, his body relaxing now that the threat had passed. Despite the tension of the moment, there was an undeniable sense of pride in the way Apollo carried himself, a dog who had faced down fear and refused to waver. The walk home was quiet, the air heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Keanu couldn't shake the image of Apollo standing between him and danger, his loyalty shining through in a way that words could never capture. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly, breaking the silence. "But you did, you always do." That night, as they sat together in the dim light of Keanu's living room, the gravity of the evening settled in. Apollo lay at Keanu's feet, his eyes half closed, but ever watchful. Keanu leaned back, his hand resting gently on Apollo's side. "I've had people walk out of my life, betray my trust," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but you're different. You've shown me what loyalty really means." Apollo shifted, resting his head on Keanu's lap as if to say, "I'll always be here." Their bond, tested once again, had only grown stronger. In the face of danger, they had proven that their connection wasn't just about survival, it was about love, trust, and the unshakable belief that they were stronger together than apart. Whatever lay ahead, Keanu knew one thing for certain: he and Apollo could face anything together. Apollo's journey had been one of transformation. The scars on his body, though faded, were still visible, a reminder of the trials He had endured, but now those scars told a different story. They were no longer marks of pain but symbols of survival, of resilience, and of a bond that had carried him through the darkest moments. Keanu often found himself marveling at Apollo, not just for his strength but for the quiet wisdom that seemed to emanate from the dog. There was something deeply calming about his presence, a kind of grounding force that drew people in. It was this unspoken connection, this ability to bring comfort, that inspired Keanu to think beyond their own journey. One day, as they walked along a path lined with tall trees swaying gently in the breeze, Keanu spoke aloud, more to himself than anyone. "You've got something special, Apollo. People see it, they feel it. I think we could do more." The idea took root. Keanu began sharing Apollo's story in small, meaningful ways. It started with a visit to a nearby animal shelter where Apollo's calm demeanor brought comfort. Two frightened animals waiting for homes. The staff watched in awe as even the most anxious dogs settled under Apollo's gaze, his presence a silent reassurance. "He's like a magnet for hope," one of them said, shaking their head in wonder. From there the ripple effect grew. Keanu and Apollo were invited to visit a local school where children sat cross-legged on the floor, wide-eyed, as Keanu shared their journey. He spoke not as an actor, but as someone deeply changed by the bond he shared with Apollo. "This dog taught me more about resilience than I could ever imagine," he said, his voice steady but warm. "He didn't just survive, he thrived, and that's something we can all learn from." Apollo, lying at Keanu's feet, lifted his head at the sound of the children's applause. One by one they approached to pet him, their small hands gently brushing his sleek fur. The moment was simple yet profound, a quiet connection that spoke volumes about the power of love and trust. Keanu and Apollo's impact didn't stop. Their word spread, and soon their visits extended to hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and community events. Each time Apollo's calm presence and quiet strength seemed to light up the room. He didn't need to do anything extraordinary. His very existence was enough to inspire. At one hospital, Keanu met a young girl named Mia. She had been in and out of treatments for months, her spirits dimmed by the weight of it all. When Apollo entered the room, her tired eyes lit up. She reached out a trembling hand, and Apollo leaned in, pressing his head gently into her palm. A smile, faint but genuine, spread across her face. Her parents stood nearby, tears streaming, silently watching as their daughter found a spark of hope they hadn't seen in weeks. Moments like these became the heart of Keanu and Apollo's mission. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It was about the quiet moments, the small victories that reminded people of their own strength. On a quiet evening, Keanu and Apollo returned to the beach where it had all begun. The horizon stretched wide and endless, the waves carrying a steady rhythm that mirrored their shared heartbeat. Apollo ran ahead, his paws kicking up sprays of sand, his energy boundless and free. Keanu watched, his hands tucked into his pockets, his face soft with a mixture of pride and gratitude. When Apollo returned, his tongue ling happily, Keanu knelt to meet him. "You've changed so much," he said, his voice low, "but you've also changed me. You've reminded me what it means to believe in second chances." Apollo leaned into him, his warm body pressing against Keanu's chest. There were no words between them, only understanding, deep and profound. The journey they had shared wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation, about finding purpose in the most unlikely places. As they walked home under a sky painted with stars, Keanu couldn't help but smile. Their story wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning, a story not just of a man and his dog, but of hope, loyalty, and the kind of bond that could inspire the world to believe in miracles. What did you think of the story of Keanu Reeves and Apollo? If it touched your heart and you found it inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments. If it didn't quite resonate, feel free to share your thoughts with a 7. I'd love to hear your perspective. This story is a fictional piece crafted to convey a heartfelt message, the extraordinary bond between humans and animals, and the unwavering loyalty of Dogs to their owners, it's a reminder of the courage and resilience that both humans and animals can show when facing life's challenges together. If you believe in the power of these connections, please share this story with your friends and loved ones. Let's spread a little more kindness and hope in the world. And if you'd like to hear more stories that touch the soul, subscribe to Tapestry of Worlds, where we celebrate the magic of storytelling and the extraordinary moments that connect us. All your support means everything. Thank you for being part of this journey, reader.